Today we're learning how to create stop motion videos. If you're a product photographer and you want to upgrade your skill set, stop motions are the perfect way to transition to more video content. Stop motions are easy to do in a few simple steps, and I'm walking you through everything you need to get started. Let's get into it. Hey there, if you're new here, my name's Chris. I'm teaching you photography and how to start a creative business. I want to say a special hi to all my new subscribers. Welcome to the channel. Over the past year, I've created dozens of stop motions for a lot of different brands. Today, I'm teaching you how you can do the same. Brands and their audiences love stop motion videos because of how engaging they are. The good news is if you already know how to take a good product photo, you can easily make awesome stop motion videos. We're walking through thinking of the idea for the stop motion, the gear required, the setup, and then the actual shooting. And finally, we're gonna put it all together and create something like this. If you haven't seen my creative product photography guide, that'll give you some good background knowledge for this video. First things first, why make stop motions to begin with? From a creative standpoint, they let you create a story you wouldn't be normally able to tell with just a photo. They take more work, but the return is so rewarding. From a business standpoint, companies love using these because they capture the attention of their audiences better than just a photo. That means you'd be able to charge a lot more money if you started offering stop motions in your services. In this digital age, capturing attention is the name of the game. If you're just doing these to post on your own social media, that's great too. Your audience will love looking at these. Once you know you want to create a stop motion, it's time to think of an idea for the video. Stop motions can be created for anything really. If you're a food photographer, you can tell a story about the food that you're photographing. If you're strictly a product photographer that works with candle companies, you can create a stop motion of a candle coming into the scene and then a hand lighting it. You can even include a scene of a match striking a box beforehand to add some cool effects. Your imagination is going to be the limiting factor in what you can come up with here. I'm a product photographer specializing in food and beverage, so today we're going to focus on photographing some coffee. I've got this super concentrated coffee back here. It's meant to be stirred into milk or water and then enjoyed. I want to accomplish two things with the stop motion. One, we need to show how to actually use this product. There's nothing else on the market like this, so consumers may not be familiar with how it's meant to be drank. Number two, we need to show the taste appeal of the product. We want people seeing the stop motion to think it tastes better than just regular coffee. Here's what I'm thinking for the stop motion. We have the bottle of coffee and a tablespoon in the scene. Then we have a glass full of ice and milk come into the scene from the side. Next, a hand comes in, takes off the cap, and we pour some of the coffee onto the tablespoon. Finally, the tablespoon pours the coffee into the glass, and we see the coffee cascade down, adding some taste appeal. There's a lot of moving parts here, so before I shoot these, I write everything down on some paper and have it next to the scene so that I can quickly glance over at it if I need to reference it. Now that we have our idea, let's talk about the setup. If you're getting any value out of this video so far, please drop a like below. I love teaching this stuff, and your support, it really helps me make more of these. If you like the content, please subscribe to stay notified of future videos. Alright, so the setup. The beauty of stop motion is that you don't need any extra gear than you would normally use for a standard product photography shoot. I'll be using a decent camera with a 24 to 70mm lens. A tripod is going to be a must here. The photos all have to be set the same way so that they're not moving scene to scene. You need a light source for this as well. I'll be using a strobe light with a dome diffuser on it, but you can also use a continuous video light or even a big window for natural light. Natural light might be tough though because it's going to be changing throughout the shoot, so the frames might not look consistent throughout the entire stop motion. Other than that, you just need a creative setup that will match your product. Watch my creative product photography video where I really dive into creating a setup that will make your product stand out. So let's go back to my table setup and we can walk through everything together. Alright, so we're back here in my setup. I've got a Sony a7 III with a 24 to 70mm lens set at 50mm right now. I've got this on a tripod with a sandbag holding it down so it doesn't move around at all. I've set up a light on a classic 45 degrees to the side and 45 degrees angle down. Normally I use an a7R4 for these shoots, but I'm going to be using the a7 III since I'm recording this with the a7R4. So next I'm going to build out a scene with this nice wooden backdrop. I want to get a little creative here, but I also want to keep the focus on the product itself. This part gets a little tricky because you want to be aware of how the scene is going to look when you change stuff around during the actual stop motion. So here we're gonna have this glass coming into the scene. So that's the one thing I have to keep in mind. So we have to leave room for that in the scene. We're gonna have our hands coming to the scene too, casting shadows. So that's something we have to be cognizant about as well. So I'll be framing up this product just on one of the thirds here. So this is like on the left side of the frame. And then the spoon it comes with, I'm gonna have that kind of towards the middle here. We can create a path for the glass to come in as well. So the glass is coming in from the right of the scene and it's gonna be on that right third. I want to keep this pretty standard. So like I said, we got this wooden backdrop here. I've got this almond tan colored backdrop back here. And I have this big bag of coffee I use for product shoots. So I'm just gonna use this for a little bit of pizzazz to the scene. All right, nothing too crazy there, just some coffee, just all over the scene. I wanna be sure that we have the path for the glass to come in and the coffee's not blocking that, so we're good on that, it looks like. So let's add some ice and milk to that glass and see what we can do. All right, so we got everything set up. Right now, we want to go over how everything's gonna look. So we wanna do some sample photos, make sure our settings are right. I'll be shooting this at f8. With a shutter speed of 1/125th, ISO 100, and then I'm setting the flash to just illuminate the scene perfectly. So let's take that test photo. Move the glass around to see if there's any reflections that you should be aware of. And quickly reviewing the photos, everything looks pretty good there. One thing I want to mention here is focus. So whenever I do stop motions, I almost always use manual focus. The reason is when the stop motions are going, the camera, I don't want it to be guessing where to focus. So I predetermine the set focus in manual focus. And for this, I'm just going to focus on the jut here. I'm going to have this glass on the same plane here so that I don't have to worry about that focus. One thing I have to remember is when I'll be lifting this, I want to make sure that the plane is the same so it stays in focus because we're using manual focus, so we need to make sure that everything stays on the same plane. So with that in mind, let's set the focus and make sure that that's okay. So I'm just taking a photo here to make sure everything's good, zooming in on it, and it looks great. So we've got everything set up except the timer on the camera. Before we go through it, let me walk you through some of the most common mistakes people make in stop motions. Number one, you can't move anything in your scene that isn't supposed to move. So like all the coffee in the background here, it should stay in the same place. The stop motion won't look professional if things in the background move around. Number two, you have to be aware of shadows that you're casting in the frame. In stop motions, you're constantly moving things around and you need to be aware of your body position relative to the light. So that might be kind of confusing, but let me explain. Before each photo, you need to return your body to the same position it was before you took the photo. Sometimes you might move something and your hand might be in the way of the light source. And if that ends up happening, it's gonna cast a shadow on the scene and you're gonna get a frame with like a big shadow in it and it's not gonna look good in the final stop motion. During the edit, when you go to edit this, you'll see that ugly frame with the shadow and you won't be able to do anything about it. Finally, you need to be able to trigger your camera shutter without touching your camera. Even though your camera's on a tripod, when you press the shutter, it's gonna move around slightly. And this slight movement is gonna cause your scene to move around. There are two ways to get around this. Number one is using this remote trigger. You can press it with one hand and the camera fires remotely. Number two, and my personal favorite, it's the interval shooting function. This is built into Sony cameras, so you can go through the menu, select the number of photos, I usually do around 300, and then set the interval timer. I like to set the timer to a couple seconds, but it depends on what you're shooting. Play around with this and see what's comfortable for you. For this, you're gonna have the camera shooting non-stop for the entire 300 photos you set it to, or however many you set it to. For this, you just wanna switch up the scene slightly after every time the camera fires. Remember to always go back to the same place you were standing or sitting after every frame. So I've got the camera set. Let's see what happens just to test it. So we got the camera firing. Right now it's set to every 3 seconds. So as you can see, the flash is going off. I'm not doing anything. It's just gonna shoot until it hits that the photo threshold. So all that's left to do is to follow our little script and see what we get. All right, so that went pretty smoothly. We spilled a little bit of coffee during that pouring scene. I was trying to do it slowly to get multiple shots in, but kind of just spill over the side. So hopefully it doesn't show up in the final stop motion. But let's go ahead and import these photos and do the edit. Okay, so everything's in Lightroom now. We have one-to-one previews built. So let's begin the editing process. First, we gotta crop this photo. It's a bit of a tilt here, so let's correct that. Next, I'm gonna make this 4x5 for Instagram, the composition as needed here, and we're good to go. We're gonna use the same preset I used during my creative product photography guide. So if we go into Lightroom's built-in presets, we can go into the cinematic menu, CN08, and from there, I'm going to adjust the exposure just a tad. This I'm not gonna touch for now. We're gonna fix the tone curve, bring the whites all the way up, blacks all the way down here. We're gonna add in some more color, so blues, all this stuff. Even though they might not exist here, I like to add them in. Go back to your basic exposure menu, adjust as needed here. Not really gonna go much in depth on this. This is more of a stop motion editing guide, but let's just make it look somewhat decent. Maybe boost saturation just a tad, and I think that looks pretty good. So, gonna copy these settings over. Just copy literally everything, and then select everything. I'm gonna do Command-Shift-S to synchronize the settings with every single photo, and we're good to go. So now every photo has the same settings applied to it, and we can see how it's already coming together here. This next step is going to be pretty annoying because we're going to be removing the duplicates in the scene. So any two photos that look the same, we're going to just get rid of one of them. So here we're pressing X, setting as rejected, and we're gonna go through all of these and reject the ones that we don't want. So like this one, my hand's in the scene, reject it. So go through all these, remove any duplicates as you see fit, and I'll meet you back here after I'm done with this. Okay, so we've removed all the photos that we don't want here. I've already noticed some things that I don't like about this stop motion, but we'll go in depth into that later on. One thing I want to do is correct my skin tone here. This looks a bit too yellow, so we're just going to go into hue, make it a bit more realistic, decrease the yellows a bit here. And now what we're going to do is just copy and again synchronize the settings with everything, and we're good to go. So we're going to click on all the unflagged photos. These are all the ones we didn't reject. Let's go through these real quickly and see how everything looks. Already we're seeing like a nice stop motion forming here. Yeah, we've got everything we like, everything we need. So we're gonna go ahead and export this and put these into Final Cut Pro so we can make this a video. So everything selected, Command-Shift-E. We're gonna do 4x5 resolution, so that's 1080 by 1350. Great for Instagram. Select the folder that we want to export everything into. Export those, and now let's go into Final Cut Pro while these export and get everything set up for the next step. So now we got Final Cut open. We create a new library for this project. Now we're gonna import all the photos into this library. Click Import Media here. Then we're gonna go into the folder that we just exported everything into. Click Photos, select everything, leave files in place, import all. Now we have to make a project in our timeline, so we're gonna do Custom and do the same resolution as the photos. That was 1080 by 1350. Title it however you want and hit OK. So we got this project opened up. Select all these photos, just do Command A on your computer and then hit E to put them in the timeline. And now we got a timeline full of all the photos. But if we look here, this is set to 8 minutes and 50 seconds, which is a very slow stop motion, sorry. What we want to do is change the speed of all these. So let's select all the photos, go here, hit change duration. I like to have each photo go on for about 4 to 5 frames. So let's set this to 4, hit enter, and let's see what we got with that. Play it back. Yeah, I think that's pretty awesome. It's not too slow, not too fast, and it's a pretty good time lapse in my opinion. There's something going on here. We have this last photo being the first photo for some reason, so let's just delete that. That was an extra photo that we don't need, but let's play it from the start here. This first photo is also something we don't want. Okay, let's make sure all the photos are exactly how we want them. Yeah, so that looks good. As we're watching this, I want to point out some things that I don't like about this stop motion. We made a few mistakes during it. One is right here. When I grab the spoon, you can see my hand is covering up the brand name. Now that's bad. Clients want the brand to be clearly visible throughout the entire process. And here my hand is covering it up as we're pouring, which is very bad because this is when you're actually seeing the product coming out. So you don't see the brand name during that. Not good. So that's the first mistake. Second mistake is clearly the spill that happened back here. You can, if you're really particular about this, you can see the coffee spilling in the back there. If this was for the client, I obviously would reshoot this. This is just a tutorial for you guys, so it's good to go back and see our mistakes and how we could improve this kind of thing, right? One other thing that you might notice is the shadows on the bottom left of the stop motion here when my hands come in. This is what I was talking about earlier about you blocking the light. So in this situation, I couldn't really do anything about that since I needed to bring my hands in. It's not really noticeable. But if you would picture that my hands being on the right side of this frame, you can imagine the whole thing, the whole wooden board being covered in shadows because of my hands blocking it. So that's why I opted to have my hands on the left side here. So yeah, if I were to reshoot this, definitely would want that logo to be visible throughout it. I would definitely try not to spill again. If I did, I'd reshoot it, or we could Photoshop that out. And I was kind of flustered with that spill, so I took the spoon out right away here. And it kind of just disappears. That's not really natural, but a lot of people aren't going to notice that. So for the purpose of this video, it's fine. But if it was a client project, you definitely want to make sure everything is perfect. So that's it. We're going to go ahead, export this file, and then just save it to whatever folder you have, and we're good to go. Well, there you have it. Stop motion shouldn't be intimidating after watching this video. I've been doing these for a while, so everything ended up working out perfectly here. When I was starting out with these though, I would mess up some little things and have to just reshoot them a bunch of times. Just keep at it and they'll get easier over time. Remember to always write down what steps you're taking so you have to worry about that stuff while you're shooting. Please tag me on Instagram @ChrisPieta. I'm excited to see what you come up with. I hope you learned something here, and if you did, please give this video a like. If you want to stay notified for more stuff like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. Alright, I appreciate you watching and your time, and I'll see you on the next one.